Caleb Morris had lived on the wide stretch of land his father left him for as long as he could remember. The ranch sat between rolling hills and a quiet river that curved like a ribbon through the dry earth. Every morning, sunlight crawled over the land slowly, touching the grass, the fences, the barns, and finally the porch where Caleb always stood with a warm cup of coffee. He liked the peaceful routine. He liked knowing that every day would start the same way. It gave him comfort in a world that often changed faster than he liked. Caleb was not old, but he was no longer young. His hair had a few silver threads, and his eyes carried the quiet look of someone who had seen life go in a different direction than expected. He had once imagined a busy home filled with children, a wife who laughed easily, and family gatherings under the big oak tree behind the house. But life did not unfold that way. Relationships had slipped away. Dreams had shifted. And with time, he accepted that he would not have a family of his own. The ranch became his companion. The animals, the soil, the sky, these were his partners in the quiet dance of everyday living. He woke up early, fed the horses, checked the fences, and rode across the fields to make sure everything was in order. His days were simple but full. He worked hard and slept well. People in town knew him as the quiet rancher who minded his business, helped when needed, and spoke only when he had something worth saying. Some admired his independence. Others wondered how he handled the loneliness. Caleb, however, never called it loneliness. To him, it was simply life as it had turned out, and he had made peace with it. Yet peaceful does not always mean perfect. For a few weeks, Caleb noticed something strange. At first, it was nothing more than a missing loaf of bread. He assumed he misplaced it or left it on the counter where one of the ranch dogs might have gotten to it. Then, a few days later, he found that jars of canned beans were gone. He scratched his head, confused but not worried. Maybe he had forgotten he used them. Maybe he gave some to a neighbor recently and simply did not remember. But then more things disappeared. A bag of dried apples, a couple of cheese blocks, a bundle of firewood from the small shed beside the barn. Caleb stood inside the shed one afternoon, hands on his hips, staring at the empty space where the food should have been. He was careful with his supplies. He kept lists, counted items, restocked only when needed. Mistakes were possible, but this felt different. He ran his fingers along the dusty wooden shelves. The space was clean. Too clean. Someone had taken the items gently, as if trying not to disturb anything. That small detail made him pause. A wild animal would have made a mess. A neighbor borrowing supplies would have left a note. No, this was quiet, careful, intentional. The thought made a small frown settle on his face. He didn't like the idea of someone sneaking onto his property. Not because of anger, but because it meant someone out there was in need or trouble, and they chose not to ask for help. Caleb was a firm believer in honesty. He did not like stealing, even if the thief took only food. But he also understood that sometimes people reach a point where asking becomes too hard. Still, he needed to figure out what was happening. He could not let the mystery continue. If someone was coming onto his ranch, he needed to know why, and more importantly, he needed to know if they needed help. That evening, he sat on his porch, staring at the horizon while the sun slid down in warm shades of orange and gold. His dogs rested near his feet. The air smelled of dry earth and the faint sweetness of hay. He thought about setting up a camera, but that felt too cold and distant, as if he were dealing with a criminal. Something inside him said, this was not a situation that needed suspicion but understanding. Instead, he decided to trust his instincts. He would keep watch. Not in an angry way. Not in a confrontational way. Just quiet observation. He had done plenty of that in his life. He was good at it. The next morning, he made sure everything looked normal. He restocked a few items in the shed and left it unlocked, just as it had always been. He believed that if the person had come once, they would come again, and if they came again, he would be ready. Days passed. Caleb continued with his work, but he paid closer attention. Every sound at night made him listen harder. Every rustle in the grass made him turn his head. Still, the thief did not return immediately. Maybe they sensed something was different. Maybe they found food somewhere else. Or maybe they were simply waiting for the right moment. One evening, a soft wind brushed across the ranch, carrying the scent of sage and the distant echo of the river. Caleb felt it, the feeling that something was about to happen. He had lived close to nature all his life, and he trusted these small signals. He saddled his horse for one final check around the property as the sky turned deep blue with scattered stars beginning to appear. When he reached the shed, he noticed something small but unmistakable, the faintest shift of air, as if the door had been touched recently. He stepped inside quietly, holding his breath. Everything looked normal. But he saw footprints near the back wall. Fresh ones. His heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from anticipation. Whoever was coming here was careful. Very careful. Caleb went back to his house, grabbed a lantern, and returned to the shed just before midnight. He placed the lantern behind a crate, letting it cast a soft glow without revealing his position. He settled quietly behind some stacked hay bales, where he had a clear view of the door, but remained hidden. The night was calm. Crickets chirped outside. The air was cool. Caleb waited, patient as always. Minutes turned into an hour, then 2. Many people would have given up. But Caleb had lived a life that taught him endurance. The ranch, the long days, the years of tending to animals, all of it, had shaped him into someone who could sit still when needed. Near dawn, just as the first hint of gray touched the sky, he heard it, the softest sound, like a foot brushing against earth. His breath steadied. A figure approached the shed door slowly, almost silently. Caleb narrowed his eyes. The person was small, light on their feet, and wrapped in a shawl that blended into the dim morning light. The door creaked open, just enough for the figure to slip inside. Caleb could see their hands tremble as they reached for a loaf of bread. The person moved as if expecting danger at every second, and just then, Caleb stepped forward. But instead of shouting or grabbing the person, he spoke quietly, gently. "I think we need to talk." The figure froze. Caleb saw the shape stiffen in fear, the bread still in their hands. He waited, giving them time. Slowly, the person turned, and the lantern light revealed a face he did not expect. It was a woman. Young, exhausted, with deep worry carved into her eyes. Her clothes were worn, her cheeks hollow, and her expression filled not with guilt, but with desperation. Caleb did not know it yet, but in that brief moment, standing inside the quiet shed at dawn, his life was about to change forever. When the woman turned toward Caleb, the soft lantern light touched her face gently, and he saw the fear in her eyes. It wasn't the fear of someone being caught doing something wrong. It was the fear of someone who had been holding on to life with tired hands for far too long. Her breath shook as she tried to speak, but no words came out. For a moment, the only sound in the small shed was the quiet rustle of the bread she still held. Caleb did not move closer. He stayed exactly where he was, giving her a little space so she wouldn't feel trapped. He lifted his hands slowly, palms open, showing he meant no harm. "It's all right," he said gently. "I'm not here to scare you." The woman swallowed hard, her shoulders trembling. Her shawl slipped slightly, and Caleb noticed how thin she looked, as if she had been skipping many meals. Her eyes darted to the door, then back to Caleb, as though she was deciding whether to run or stay. "You don't have to run," Caleb said softly. "I just want to understand what's happening." For a long moment, the woman didn't respond. Her lips pressed tightly together, and she held the bread close to her chest like someone holding something precious. She was breathing fast. "Please," Caleb added, "tell me your name." Her voice, when it finally came, sounded small and shaky. "Naya." Caleb nodded slowly, repeating it with kindness so she would know he heard her. "Naya." She blinked, surprised by how gentle his voice was. Most people, she clearly expected, would have shouted at her or dragged her away. But Caleb's calmness confused her, softened her fear just a bit. "Why are you taking food from here?" he asked quietly, not accusing, only asking. Naya's throat tightened. Her eyes filled with tears she tried hard to hide. She looked down at the bread, then back up at him. Her breath caught, and a single tear slipped down her cheek before she brushed it away quickly, as though ashamed. I didn't want to," she whispered. "But my kids, they're hungry." The words came out broken, like she had been holding them inside for too long. She clutched the bread tighter, as if she feared it might disappear if she loosened her grip. Caleb's heart softened instantly. He had suspected someone in need. But hearing the truth directly from her, hearing the pain in her voice, made everything even clearer. He did not have children of his own, but he understood the love a parent carried. He understood desperation born from care, not selfishness. "How many kids do you have?" he asked gently. "Two," she whispered. "A boy and a girl. They're small." She lowered her head. "Since their father passed, things have been hard." Caleb didn't interrupt. He let her speak at her own pace. "No work, no steady help. I tried everything I could. I asked for help once or twice from people I knew. But," her voice faded, "people have their own problems." She took a small breath as if gathering strength. "I didn't want to beg. I didn't want to trouble anyone. I thought if I just took a little, just enough to keep them from crying at night, maybe it wouldn't hurt anyone." Her words floated in the air like fragile threads. Caleb felt a tightness in his chest. He looked at her carefully, not as a thief, but as a mother doing what she believed she had to do for her children. "Why didn't you come to ask me?" he asked, though his tone remained soft. "I was scared," she admitted honestly. "You don't know me. I don't know you. I thought you might be angry, or turn me away, or tell someone." Her voice trembled again. "I didn't want to be a burden. I just needed to feed them." Caleb sighed. Not in frustration, but in sadness. He took a slow step forward, making sure she saw his calm expression. "Naya," he said quietly, "you should not have to steal to feed your children." She flinched slightly at the word steal, not because he said it harshly, but because it reminded her of what she had become in her own eyes. She felt ashamed. She lowered the bread, her hands trembling, as if she were considering putting it back. Caleb noticed the movement and shook his head. "No," he said gently. "You keep it." Her eyes widened. But it's all right," he said simply. "You took it because you needed it. That's different from taking out of greed." Naya looked at him for a long moment, unsure if she should trust his kindness. People were not often this gentle in her life. Most good moments had been rare and short-lived. She wasn't sure if this one would also disappear. Caleb could see her hesitation. He was patient, letting her gather her courage. "Your kids," he said finally. "How old are they?" "My son is 7, she said, wiping her cheek. "My daughter is 4. Caleb nodded thoughtfully. "And you're taking care of both on your own?" She nodded once, hugging her shawl around herself as if trying to hold her strength together. "Since my husband passed, there's been no steady work. I do small tasks when I can. But money, food, it's never enough." Caleb breathed in deeply. The shed felt heavy with all the things Naya wasn't saying. She had probably walked to his ranch multiple times, each time scared, each time desperate. The image of her children waiting at home gnawed at his heart. "You shouldn't have to live like that," he said softly. "Your children shouldn't have to either." Naya's lips quivered. She bit them to keep from crying again. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I'm really trying." Drying. Caleb stood silently for a moment, thinking deeply. Then he stepped aside, pointing to the door in a gentle gesture. "Come with me," he said. Naya stiffened again. "Where?" "I'm taking you home," he said. "Not to punish you. I want to see your children. I want to understand what you need." Naya shook her head quickly, fear washing over her face again. No, no, I can't. I don't want anyone to see us like that. Caleb softened his voice even more. Naya, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to shame you. I just want to help. She looked at him with uncertainty. No one had spoken to her like this in a long time. Kindness felt unfamiliar. Like a warm coat she wasn't sure she was allowed to wear. What if someone sees you with me? She asked quietly. What if people talk? Caleb gave a small, sincere smile. Let them talk. I'd rather help someone in need than live worrying about what people think. Naya stared at him, surprised. She didn't know if she should believe his words, but something inside her loosened a small thread of trust forming where fear had been. Finally, she nodded slowly. All right, she whispered. Caleb walked beside her out of the shed. The morning light was beginning to wake the sky, turning it pale pink. The ranch dogs trotted over curiously, but Caleb waved them back gently so Naya wouldn't feel uneasy. He went to the house and packed a small bag with food, bread, dry beans, apples, some eggs, fresh milk. He placed it carefully in her hands. For your kids, he said. Naya looked at the bag, then at him, her eyes filling with gratitude so deep it almost broke her. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling. We'll talk more later, Caleb said kindly. But for now, let's make sure your children are all right. They started walking slowly toward her home, the sky brightening behind them. Each step felt like a quiet beginning, one she never expected. And one Caleb hadn't imagined either. Neither of them knew it yet. But this simple morning walk was the first step toward changing both of their lives in ways they could never have predicted. Caleb and Naya walked side by side along the quiet road that led toward the small Apache community near the edge of the ranch land. The morning air was cool, carrying the soft smell of damp earth and distant wood smoke. Birds were beginning to sing their early songs, filling the silence between them. Naya walked slowly, not because she was tired, but because she wasn't sure how to feel about someone seeing her world so closely. Caleb could sense her hesitation, but he said nothing. He knew trust was something that grew gently, not something that could be pushed. After a few minutes, Naya spoke softly. You don't have to come all the way. Caleb looked at her with a calm expression. I want to make sure you and your kids are all right. She pulled her shawl tighter around herself. No one's come to check on us in a long time, she murmured. People are busy with their own lives. That doesn't mean you should be alone in all this, Caleb replied simply. They continued walking until the landscape changed from wide-open ranch land to smaller paths leading between simple homes. Some houses looked well cared for, with flowers planted outside. Others looked tired and worn, the wood weathered, the windows covered with patched curtains. The place where Naya lived was near the last row of houses, a small one-room structure with a sagging roof and a broken fence leaning sideways. Naya slowed her steps even more, almost as if she hoped Caleb would decide to stop and turn around. But he walked beside her without hesitation. She took a quiet breath and stepped inside. The inside of the house was small and dim, but clean. Naya had done her best to keep everything organized even though she had so little. A blanket hung over the window to keep out the cold air. A small wooden table stood in the center of the room, missing one corner. Two tiny mattresses lay neatly in the corner, covered with thin blankets. On those mattresses, two children stirred awake. The little girl, no more than 4 years old, sat up first, rubbing her sleepy eyes. She blinked when she saw Caleb, surprised by the sight of a stranger. The boy, a bit older, watched quietly, his expression serious, far more serious than a child his age should ever have to be. Naya knelt beside them, brushing their hair gently. It's all right, she said softly. This is Mr. Caleb. He brought us some food. The boy's eyes widened, and he looked at the bag of food in her hands with disbelief. The girl's small face brightened, a tiny smile forming as though the sight of apples and bread was like seeing something magical. Caleb felt something inside him soften even more. He had seen hungry animals before, thin cattle, stray dogs, but seeing hunger in a child's eyes was different. It wasn't just physical need. It was the heaviness of a life that had been hard for too long. These children deserved better. Naya unwrapped the bag slowly, almost reverently, as though she feared the food might vanish if she moved too quickly. She handed her children small pieces of bread first. The boy took his quietly, whispering a soft, "Thank you." The girl giggled and took a big bite, crumbs falling on her blanket. Caleb watched them eat with the kind of tenderness he didn't show often. Something about their innocence tugged at his heart, in a deep, unexpected way. They reminded him of what he had always wished for: small faces running through his home, laughter echoing in the halls, tiny hands grabbing his fingers. He had buried those dreams long ago. But now, standing in this tiny room, they stirred again. When the children were settled, Naya sat down opposite Caleb. She looked tired in a way that didn't just come from lack of sleep, but from years of pressure, fear, and carrying the weight of life alone. "I didn't want you to see this," she said softly, her voice trembling a little. "Our life isn't easy." Caleb shook his head gently. "I'm not here to judge your life. I just want to understand what you're facing." 70 lime. I'm on her lime. I'm on her limes of Wyvermander. Caleb shook his head gently. Naya looked down at her hands. They were small but worn, the hands of someone who worked hard every day. "My husband passed away almost a year ago," she said quietly. "He used to take jobs around the area, building fences, repairing roofs, things like that. He wasn't paid much. But we managed." She took a small breath. "After he was gone, everything changed. Suddenly, there was no steady income. I tried taking small cleaning jobs, but they didn't last. Sometimes I helped elderly neighbors for a few dollars, but it was never enough." She paused, her eyes growing shiny with unshed tears. "I applied for help, food assistance, community support. But the paperwork takes time, and sometimes things move slowly. Meanwhile, the children were hungry." Caleb listened carefully, not interrupting, not rushing her. "I asked for help from a few people," she continued. "Some were kind, but they have their own families, their own struggles. Others looked at me like I was a burden." Her voice cracked slightly. "I didn't want to keep asking. I didn't want people to think I was weak, or that I couldn't take care of my own children." Caleb's expression softened even more. "Asking for help doesn't make you weak," he said gently. "It makes you human." Naya gave a small, sad smile. Sometimes it's hard to believe that. She looked toward her kids, who were now sitting together, sharing an apple, and whispering to each other. The sight brought a mix of love and pain to her eyes. "I promised them I would take care of them. I promised them they wouldn't suffer. But there were nights when they went to sleep hungry, and I couldn't do anything." Her voice broke completely then, and she turned slightly away, wiping her eyes. Caleb felt a pang in his heart. He had seen animals suffer from drought, farms struggle through storms, but watching a mother fight silently to protect her children stirred something deeper. "You shouldn't have had to face all of this alone," he said quietly. Naya shook her head. "There are many families on the reservation who struggle. Some get help, some don't. I didn't want to bother anyone. I thought I could manage. But when the food ran out, I remembered your ranch." She glanced at him hesitantly. "Your father was known for being kind. People used to say your family never turned anyone away." That surprised Caleb. "You knew my father?" "Not well," she said. "But everyone in the area knew of him. He helped neighbors when he could. People talked about his fairness." Caleb felt something warm in his chest at the memory. His father had been a man of honesty and compassion. Maybe the memory of that kindness had guided Naya to his shed. Maybe this moment was not a simple accident, but a thread connecting past goodness to present need. "I didn't want to steal," Naya said again in a soft voice. "I just didn't want my children to cry." Caleb took a slow breath. "I understand," he said. "But you shouldn't have had to reach that point. There are better ways, Naya. And I want to help you find them." She looked at him uncertainly. Why? You don't know me. Caleb looked at her children again, their small faces bright with the comfort of food. Because no child should go hungry, he said simply. And no mother should feel alone while trying to protect her family. Naya felt her throat tighten. No one had spoken to her with such sincerity in a long time. She had grown used to polite dismissals or brief offers of help with strings attached. But Caleb's voice held no judgment, no pity, only genuine care. You don't have to face this alone anymore, Caleb said gently. Let me help. Not out of charity, but because it's the right thing to do. For a moment, Naya didn't speak. She simply breathed, letting his words settle into her heart like warm sunlight after a long winter. She looked around her tiny home, then at her children, then at Caleb. Something deep inside her began to relax, a small piece of fear melting away. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything right now, Caleb replied softly. We'll figure things out together. And as the morning light brightened the small room, gently touching the faces of the two children, a quiet understanding formed between Caleb and Naya, something built not from chance, but from the delicate, unexpected connection of two lives crossing at the exact moment they needed each other most. The next few days felt different for both Caleb and Naya. For Caleb, the ranch no longer felt as quiet as it once did. Every time he stepped outside, he found himself thinking about the little house near the edge of the community, the two small children with bright eyes, and the mother who had carried so much on her shoulders. The land was still the same, the fields, the barns, the animals, but something in his heart had shifted. He felt a new sense of purpose rising inside him, something warm and steady. For Naya, the days felt lighter. Even though her world had not magically changed overnight, there were still bills, there were still things to worry about, and there was still the challenge of raising two children alone. But she no longer felt like she had to carry everything in silence. She had told her story to someone who listened with kindness, not judgment. And that small act of sharing her burden made room for hope inside her heart. On the third morning after Caleb visited her home, he knocked softly on her door. Naya opened it, surprised but relieved to see him standing there with a gentle smile. I came to check on you and the kids, he said. She stepped aside to let him in. The children were sitting on the floor with a few small toys they had made themselves from sticks and fabric scraps. They looked up with excitement when they saw him. The little girl ran to him without hesitation, her tiny hands clutching the bottom of his shirt. Caleb laughed softly and patted her back. You two ate well the last couple of days? He asked gently. The boy nodded. Mama cooked soup last night, he said proudly. Naya smiled shyly. We saved the apples for today. Caleb nodded approvingly. Good. I'm glad. There was a soft pause before Naya spoke again. Thank you. For everything. I don't know how to repay you. Caleb shook his head immediately. I'm not looking for repayment, Naya. I'm just glad to help. She lowered her eyes, unsure how to accept such kindness without feeling guilty. But Caleb understood her hesitation before she even said anything. There is something you can do, he added gently. If you're willing. Naya looked up quickly. What is it? Work with me on the ranch, he said calmly. Not as charity. As a real job. I'll pay you a fair wage. You'll earn everything yourself. No one will be able to say you didn't. Naya stared at him for a moment, shocked. She had expected help. Maybe food for a few days. Maybe a little support. But a job? A steady income? It felt like a dream too big to hold on to. Me? She asked in disbelief. Work on your ranch? Caleb nodded. You're strong. You work hard. You're smart. And I could use the help. Naya hesitated. But I don't know ranch work. That's all right, he said with a warm smile. I can teach you. And you can help in ways you already know: cooking, cleaning, sorting supplies, helping with small tasks around the barn. There's always work to be done, and two hands are better than one. The idea terrified her a little. But it also sparked something inside, something she had not felt in months. A chance, a path forward, a way to rebuild her life with dignity. "Can I bring my children?" she asked softly. "Of course," Caleb replied without hesitation. "They can stay nearby while you work. I'll make a safe space for them." Tears gathered in her eyes. Not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming sense of relief. She nodded slowly. "I'll do it. I'll work hard. I promise." "I know you will," Caleb said gently. And so, the next morning, Naya began her first day at the ranch. She woke the children early, dressed them in warm clothes, and walked with them across the land. The rising sun painted the sky with soft pink light, and the air carried the fresh smell of morning grass. Naya felt nervous, but she also felt hopeful. Caleb greeted them with a smile. He had prepared a small corner of the barn with blankets, books, and a few simple toys he found in storage. The children ran to explore their new little space, laughing softly. Naya watched them with gratitude shining in her eyes. Caleb handed her a pair of gloves. "Ready to start?" he asked. She nodded, pulling them on. At first, the work felt unfamiliar. She helped carry hay, washed buckets, swept the barn floor, and sorted tools. Her movements were unsure, but she watched Caleb closely, learning quickly. Every time she succeeded, he gave her a small nod of approval. Every time she hesitated, he guided her patiently. "You're doing well," he told her more than once. By midday, Naya felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that comes from honest work, not from worry. During lunch, Caleb brought out sandwiches and fruit. They sat together near the barn, while the children played in the soft dirt a few feet away. The sun warmed the ground, and the quiet sound of animals filled the air. "You're a fast learner," Caleb said. Naya smiled shyly. "I'm trying my best." "I can see that." She looked at him for a moment, then lowered her voice. "It feels strange. Having help. Having someone believe in me." Caleb looked at her gently. "Everyone deserves someone who believes in them, Naya. And you've been carrying too much alone." Her eyes softened with emotion. She didn't respond, but her heart did. As days turned into weeks, Naya grew more confident. She learned how to feed the animals, how to mix their grains, how to patch small tears in the fences, and how to care for the chickens. She even learned to lead one of the gentler horses to the corral, her hands steady and sure. The children grew comfortable on the ranch, too. They followed Caleb around sometimes, asking endless questions about everything. The chickens, the tractors, the water tanks, even the sky. Caleb laughed more in those weeks than he had in years. The sound of children's voices in the air filled spaces inside him he didn't know were empty. One afternoon, Caleb stood quietly at a distance, watching Naya work. She was carrying a bucket of feed, her steps steady and confident, her shawl tied firmly around her waist. The sunlight touched her hair, making it glow softly. She looked strong. She looked hopeful. She looked like someone stepping out of the shadow of struggle and walking toward a new chapter. Naya noticed him watching and smiled shyly. He smiled back. There was no need for words in that moment. Something gentle passed between them, respect, understanding, warmth. That evening, when the day was done, Naya gathered her children to head home. Caleb walked with them a little way before stopping near the fence. "You did well today," he said. Naya lowered her eyes, a soft blush of pride warming her cheeks. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Quote, "You earned it," Caleb replied. "And tomorrow, we'll learn something new." She nodded, her heart full. As she walked away with her children, Caleb stood watching the small family disappear into the fading light. The ranch around him felt alive in a new way, filled with laughter, footsteps, and gentle hope. What began as a desperate act had slowly grown into trust. What started as fear had become understanding, and what began as simple help was quietly turning into something deeper, something that neither of them fully understood yet. But both of them felt it. This was not the end of their story. This was only the beginning of something meaningful, something that would reshape their lives in ways neither could have imagined. As the weeks passed, the ranch slowly became a second home for Naya and her children. Each morning, they arrived with the rising sun, and each evening, they left as the sky softened into shades of orange and gold. What started as simple help had turned into a steady routine, something dependable and comforting. For Naya, this routine was like a warm blanket around her life, bringing stability where there had once been fear. For Caleb, the ranch felt fuller, richer, and more alive than it had in years. The children grew more playful with every passing day. They helped with small chores, sweeping the porch, gathering feathers near the chicken coop, or carrying small baskets of eggs. The little girl had taken a liking to following Caleb around and asking simple questions, her voice light like a bird's chirp. The boy was quieter, but he watched carefully, learning everything with focused eyes. Sometimes, Caleb caught him studying the animals with a thoughtful look, as though trying to understand the rhythm of ranch life. Every once in a while, when the children laughed together, Caleb felt something warm bloom inside his chest. Something he had not felt in many years. He had once given up on the idea of seeing children running around his home, or hearing their laughter echoing in the open air. Yet now, every day brought these small, precious moments back into his world. Naya noticed these changes too. She saw how gently Caleb spoke to her children, how patient he was with them, how naturally they gravitated toward him. She also noticed how he had begun smiling more real, soft smiles that reached his eyes. She often caught herself smiling at the sight without meaning to. Though she tried not to think too deeply about it, some part of her heart began to feel safer, warmer, and more open. One afternoon, after a long day of work, a soft breeze swept across the ranch. The sky was clear, and the sun cast a golden glow over everything. The children were near the barn, playing with a pile of small stones they had collected. Naya and Caleb stood near the fence, taking a short break. The peacefulness of the moment wrapped around them. "You've done a lot these past few weeks," Caleb said, watching her with a gentle expression. "I hope you know how much I appreciate your hard work." Naya smiled shyly. "You've given me a chance I didn't think existed. I should be thanking you." "It wasn't a favor," he replied. "You earned it, and your help has made everything easier around here." She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "I feel like I can breathe again," she said softly. "Before, every day felt like climbing a mountain. Now things feel smoother. I don't wake up scared anymore." Caleb nodded slowly. "You shouldn't have to live in fear. No one should." Naya looked toward her children, who were now trying to build a tall stack of stones. Her voice softened even more. "They laugh more now. They sleep better. They aren't hungry anymore. That alone means everything to me." Caleb's eyes softened. "They deserve to laugh. So do you." There was a quiet pause between them, comfortable, warm. They didn't need many words. The understanding between them had grown naturally, like a plant, slowly stretching toward sunlight. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the community began to notice the changes too. Some people were surprised to see Naya walking to the ranch every morning with confidence in her step. Others smiled when they saw her children clean, fed, and cheerful. A few curious neighbors stopped by to greet Caleb or to offer small words of support. Though some people whispered, Caleb paid no mind. He had never lived his life based on what others thought, and he wasn't about to start now. His priority was simple: helping where help was needed, and doing what felt right in his heart. Over time, Naya began to take on more responsibilities on the ranch. She learned how to mix special feed for the horses, how to mend small sections of the fence, and how to tend to the garden near the porch. Caleb taught her how to identify when the animals needed rest or extra care. She was patient, focused, and determined to learn everything she could. One day, after finishing a long task of cleaning the chicken coop, Naya stood up and stretched her arms. Caleb watched her with a soft smile. "You've become a natural at this," he said. Naya laughed lightly. "I never thought I'd be doing ranch work, but it feels peaceful." "It suits you," Caleb said sincerely. "You bring a calm energy to this place." She felt her cheeks grow warm at his words. Compliments were rare in her life, and sincerity even rarer. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and looked away with a soft smile. As time passed, the bond between Caleb and Naya deepened in small, gentle ways. Sometimes they worked side by side, passing tools to each other without speaking. Sometimes they shared stories during lunch about their childhoods, Caleb talking about his father, teaching him ranch work, and Naya sharing memories of simple games she played growing up. She spoke of her late husband too, not in sadness every time, but with the quiet respect of someone who still carried love, but had accepted life's changes. Caleb always listened with patience, never rushing her, never judging her past. And Naya noticed that being around him made it easier to breathe, easier to feel safe, easier to imagine a future that wasn't filled with worry. The children, too, had grown comfortable around Caleb. The boy often asked him questions about the animals, and sometimes Caleb taught him small tasks like how to brush a horse gently or how to gather eggs without cracking them. The little girl often sat on the porch steps with Caleb, asking him to tell her stories about the ranch. He always did, sometimes funny, sometimes simple, always kind. It didn't take long for the ranch to fill with the sounds of laughter, small footsteps, and soft chatter. The once silent home now felt warm, lively, and filled with new memories. One evening, as the sky slowly turned purple, Caleb stood near the corral with Naya beside him. The air was calm, and the only sound was the soft chewing of the horses in the distance. The children were playing nearby, picking wildflowers. "It's strange," Naya said quietly, watching her children play. "Sometimes I think back to the day you found me in your shed. I was so scared, so desperate." Caleb nodded. "It was a difficult moment, but it brought us here." She smiled softly. "Yes, and I'm grateful. More than I can say." Caleb turned to her. "I'm grateful too, Naya. You and your children. You've brought something into my life I didn't know I was missing." Her breath caught gently at his words. She looked up at him, her eyes warm and thoughtful. "You've brought hope back into ours." They stood quietly for a few moments, the gentle silence saying more than words could. The children ran toward them, holding handfuls of flowers. The little girl placed one in Caleb's hand. Giggling, the boy handed another to his mother. Caleb looked at the small, delicate flowers and then at the small family standing before him. He felt something deep inside, peace, belonging, and a kind of joy he thought he would never experience. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the four of them walked back toward the house together. It wasn't a grand moment, not a loud one, but it was a meaningful one, a moment filled with quiet love, trust, and the promise of a future built on kindness. What had begun with a frightened whisper, "My kids are hungry," had grown into something far greater, a new beginning, a new purpose, and a bond that felt as strong as family. Caleb no longer felt alone, Naya no longer felt afraid, and the children no longer felt hunger or uncertainty. Together, they had created something special, built not on charity, but on respect, hard work, and the gentle, steady warmth of shared hope.